Welcome to the Zero Hanger TV mailbag, where we answer your questions. Don't forget, if you want to get involved, you can send us a talking point or a hot take or a question into our socials, but let's get straight into it. Mitch, so first question, actually more of a hot take. So the only way of beating the Blues is for them to face Brisbane at the Gabba. That's sent in by Lucas Green.
I don't think that's the case. Obviously, I think Brisbane are the only team who have been undefeated at home this year, and obviously they've turned the Gabba into a bit of a fortress over the last few seasons. There's certainly an outcome with where the ladder sits and what can be moved this weekend, where Carlton win their qualifying final or the elimination final, and Brisbane lose their qualifying final, then those two can meet, and it certainly can work as well if Brisbane win, Carlton win, and they kind of cross paths in a preliminary final. So certainly can be a result. I don't think it's the only way. I wouldn't be ruling out a trip to South Australia to play Port Adelaide. There's certainly a chance that they come up against Collingwood or Melbourne at some point at the MCG, and whilst they're on a pretty good winning streak, maybe they could win one of those two. But I don't see the Blues being easily favourites for just about any other encounter other than playing Brisbane at the Gabba. They'll probably be favourites against in their week one final, whether that be St Kilda, GWS, Sydney, or the Western Bulldogs. But no, I wouldn't say that Brisbane are the only side that can beat them, and it having to be at their own home deck of the Gabba.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see if Lucas is a Blues fan or not. But just staying on that, do you think that Brisbane at the Gabba or Port at Adelaide Oval is a harder game come finals time?
Results will say Brisbane. I would much rather play Brisbane in finals, I think. But yeah, that is a close one. I think I would probably make Port Adelaide in South Australia the harder one between the two.
Yep, agreed. All right, so next one comes from Riley Peters. What would Richmond want in return for Dusty if he becomes a Sun?
We covered this earlier in the week on I guess what a deal would look like for it to be a win-win situation. So you can go to our YouTube or socials pages to find that video. There'll be a lot to play out. I think a lot of the focus would be on the money that Dusty's owed and who's forking up most of that, or how much each club kind of pays up. And then on top of that, what's good trade value that Richmond would want in return for a bloke who's maybe only got a couple of years left. He's been very good this year, mind you, but certainly not at his best. But yeah, we discussed all that and what a deal that would maybe satisfy both teams might look like.
Yep, so check that one out on our YouTube channel. Next one comes from Isaac Grant. Is Travis Boak in Port Adelaide's best 22?
It's a good question. He's been subbed 2 of the last 3 games he's played in. I think he even missed a game in between there. So there's certainly questions over, whether he is a part of that leading midfield mix like he has been for such a long time now. Obviously, you've got Butters, Rosie, Horn-Francis ahead of him. Even Dan Houston, Will and Drew will get minutes probably prioritised through midfield. So it does, make it a question of how involved he will be in their finals run. There's a very good chance that these roles as a tactical sub for Boak have been to maybe give him some fresh legs in time for finals. Certainly a big game player, as we know through showdowns and in previous finals performances. He's certainly going to be a great asset to have, whether he's on field or as a tactical sub, and that could be a role that he holds down to give them a bit of energy in the second half. So as far from centre bounce, attendances, he's certainly got a few ahead of him. They've tried him on a wing role. I'm not sure how much that works. It's probably far too late in the season to experiment. But it's at the moment he's probably fitting that tactical sub role. So whether you want to call that best 22, he's not. He's the 23rd man. But as I mentioned, he's a pretty handy one to have.
Yep, agreed. All right, so next one comes from Jared Fernandez. More of a hot take. Essendon will beat Collingwood this week.
It's a big take. I'm trying to think out how big that is. It's going to be an interesting game on Friday night. Anthony McDonald-Tipungwuti's farewell game. So that could certainly play a part in if Essendon kind of get a victory in what could be their last game of the season. Now, the Bombers will need a lot to go their way to make finals. But one thing they can do, a bit of a parting message, if their season does come to a close, is ruin Collingwood's hopes of winning the minor premiership. So the Pies also need a win, assuming if Brisbane and Port Adelaide also claim wins over the weekend. So it's going to be an interesting contest, packed house at the MCG right before finals. And I think it will be a close one. There's been some tight ones before, and McDonald-Tipungwuti certainly popped up in some of those to boot a few bags on across a few Anzac days. So yeah, I won't be tipping the Bombers, but I think it's going to be a close game.
Yeah, agreed. All right, and next one from Steve Morris. Who are the Saints looking at this trade period?
We'll have, I think, our trade targets for the Saints. It's on site, but we'll have our more in-depth on Zero Hanger TV next week. Obviously, they're going to be looking at guys from the Bayside. There aren't a lot around, at least from an interstate point of view, trying to lure talent back towards Moorabbin, and they probably won't be too successful this year. It looks like they'll miss out on someone like Hayden McLean, who would be perfect for them as a key forward that can also help in the ruck, just like they want to assist Rowan Marshall. But someone that is from that area, Hugo Ralph-Smith, could be one that they do look at. I think he just would offer some great run, a cheap option from a trade perspective, and he could, if he finds himself playing a lot of minutes under Ross Lyon, could allow someone like Jack Sinclair to play more midfield time, which is what Ross is into. So that's one. But yeah, we have a few more on site, and we'll have more of a deeper dive next week on Zero Hanger TV.
Yep. All right, and last one. So Cody Carlson sent in a very nice long message because it is a bit of a complicated situation. So North Melbourne coming into the draft looked like they could come away with picks 1, 2, and possibly another top 10 prospect.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, the Roos, if they do hold on to pick 1. Obviously, yes, they'll lead the draft order and most likely take Harley Reid, but it's kind of what might follow if they finish 18th and a few other things go their way. So that pick 2 that you mentioned, that'll only come as compensation if they lose Ben Mackay through free agency. Now, through I think what's termed as the herbs and spices of free agency compensation, if a big enough deal or a lucrative enough deal is tabled to Mackay and that's accepted from his party, then the Roos, with him being a restricted free agent, have the opportunity to either allow Mackay to leave to the club that's put that bid toward him, and if that's the case, if the contract is matters of whether how long the deal is and how much he's getting paid per year and bonuses and all that kind of stuff, that'll I guess result in what kind of compensation they get in return. So if it's band 1, if it's a top compensation pick, that'll fall right after their first round pick. If it was a bit lower, then it'd be right after their second round pick, and so forth. So with potentially a really high offer of $700K across 5 years, let's say, that could potentially work in the Roos' favour, and they'd be getting pick 2 as a trade-off for Mackay. Now that isn't them taking West Coast's pick 2, it just means that they move ahead of the queue of West Coast, which they already are. So that means they'd have picks 1 and 2, West Coast would drop to 3, and everyone else would drop back 1 as well. So that's kind of how they would be getting the first 2 picks in the draft. It's not priority access or anything, it's just how the compensation works. And yeah, there's I think been some touting that they're probably going to be getting band 1 access with how in giving up Ben Mackay through free agency. They can match a rival's bid, and that would force a trade. So obviously, if there was an offer that probably wasn't going to get them band 1, then maybe they'd say, all right, we're going to match that, and whoever's keen to get him is going to have to trade with us, and then that way they might get a decent pick and probably something better than band 2, if that was the case. Now the priority, and as you mentioned, they could get a third top 10 prospect, and that's Riley Sanders. So the AFL and North Melbourne have noted that they're going to be working through whether he is eligible for their next generation academy, part of from Tasmania, and I think they've kind of got that crop down there. There's a lot to play out as far as whether he is part of their next gen academy, and then I think B is whether the Roos are deserving of priority access to him. So instead of a priority pick, which has happened before with I think Carlton and Gold Coast and a few of these other clubs have gotten priority picks early in the draft, or instead of just giving them a draft pick and any kind of spot, they're actually saying, well, you've got this kid in your academy, assuming that gets approved, why don't we just give you access to him? So next gen academy guys need to be can only be matched on after pick 40, but with this being a priority kind of case, it sounds like the AFL could say, look, if he goes pick 6, pick 7, whatever you guys, whoever bids on him, you guys can take him. So that'd be pretty significant, and it's there's been a lot to play out that's going to get to the point where that actually happens. And if it is the case, it's going to have a few clubs put off, you would think, just given that he is probably, I'd say, top 6, top 7 prospect on top of North Melbourne potentially getting picks 1 and 2 in. That I think would rub a few clubs dirty. So that's something else that could play out. But like I said, there's a lot that still needs to before we get there.
Yep, definitely a lot to play at. It's going to be pretty interesting come draft time. But that wraps it up for this week's Mailbag. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks, Phoenix.
And don't forget, you can send in all your talking points or questions or hot takes on our socials. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com.